Coming to you from the mobile Hudson Media Group studio, right here in the Uribe compound, this is Talking Politics, and I am the professor, Fernando Uribe. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get started. Here's what I'm thinking about right now. Now, ladies and gentlemen, without question, there have been some horrifying images that we have been subjected to on our newsfeed for the past several days. And of course, my heart and prayers go out to the family of George Floyd, who was unjustly murdered by an overly abusive police officer in the city of Minneapolis. And without a doubt, it calls into question, once again, police practices in the United States, and of course, issues that are very polarizing, such as race and what's going on currently in the United States. But this past week, the 44th president decided to take to the airwaves and go on CNN, what a surprise, to talk about issues about race and what needs to be done to heal the country. Well, I don't know about you folks, but for the 8 years of Barack Obama, I thought it was very disingenuous of the 44th president to sort of go and, sort of feign this fake outrage and take this sort of sanctimonious tone on television when I just looked at him as trying to lecture us about what we need to do better. Well, you know what would I say to the 44th president? Barack Obama, what did you do for your 8 years in office? Okay, now let me be very clear. The 45th president certainly has his flaws. I've articulated them on this program repeatedly, so no one can ever accuse me of not being intellectually honest and also philosophically consistent, because I am, and no one can ever accuse me of being otherwise. And folks, certainly the president right now could do a better job of having a more sort of unifying tone, but without question, many Americans are looking to him to take a more hardline stance when it comes to keeping our city safe, as we've seen looters and rioters masquerading as protesters destroying our communities, whether it's across the river in New York City, being disruptive in parts of New Jersey or in other areas of the country. We all know that these images have become exhausting and downright nauseating. But what's even more nauseating is seeing Barack Obama go on television and, sort of give me that reminder that for his 8 years in office, the liberal media never took him to task on anything. I mean, let's be very honest. Did we all of a sudden develop this, amnesia? Or did we develop this sort of like lack of a memory? Folks, from January 2009, to the very end of his term in January of 2017, do I need to remind you all about some of the misgivings of Barack Obama concerning issues of race and the police? Has everyone forgotten about the Cambridge incident in 2009? Did everybody forget about the outrage that he expressed after the Trayvon Martin situation? Has anyone forgotten about what happened in Ferguson, Missouri? Has anyone forgotten about what happened in Baltimore or in Charlotte or even here in New York after the untimely and wrongful death of Eric Garner? But you know what? For 8 years, for whatever reason, the liberal media never took Barack Obama to task. And you know what? Here's a newsflash for everybody. Because many people might say, well, it's just Republicans trying to obstruct the president. No, it wasn't. Because guess what? The president can direct the Justice Department in Washington, which serves at his pleasure, not at the pleasure of anybody else. All right? Those are his appointees at the Department of Justice. And after all of the aforementioned incidents I just named, do you think it would have dawned on Barack Obama to maybe enact some policies to reform what's happened? Again, I'll list them again. The incident in Cambridge in 2009, certainly the untimely death of Trayvon Martin, the incident in Ferguson, the incident in Baltimore, the incident in Charlotte, unrest here in New York nearby because of Eric Garner. Folks, Barack Obama had 8 years to address this, and now all of a sudden he wants to sort of come on television and lecture us about what we're doing wrong. Barack Obama needs to sort of look in the mirror, because for 8 years, his Justice Department did zero. I'll say it again, he did zero to address issues about police practices and issues about race in this country. Folks, isn't it all we heard in the summer and fall of 2008 was hope and change, hope and change, hope and change? Folks, it was nothing but hype. And if you're looking in the mirror and being honest with yourself, you'll agree with me. Because all we heard for his 8 years was a lot of speeches and, sort of giving this very different tone than the current president. And I'll admit that. But for all the pomp and circumstance that the liberal media gave Barack Obama, nothing was accomplished. but yet I'm supposed to take him seriously when he goes on CNN or goes on Facebook Live and talks about issues concerning race. You know what? You ran on race. Your entire platform and campaign was predicated on race. And guess what happened during your 8 years in office? You did absolutely nothing. All of the aforementioned incidents happened on your watch. But did the liberal media ever take you to task on it? Did the liberal media ever hold you accountable? Did the liberal media ever put you under the microscope? Of course not. You mean excuses, whether it's about Republicans obstructing you or anything else. And guess what? There were no Republicans obstructing you. There was no one obstructing you but your own ineptitude and, quite frankly, your complacency. Because you could have directed the Justice Department to look into investigations, to enact more stringent policies, but you chose not to do that. You prefer to just sort of use race and weaponize it when it suited you. And that's what you did, Barack Obama. You need to own that. And for all of his supporters online who still sort of fawn over him and have this ridiculous love affair, do me a favor, folks. Like, grow up, okay? We both know that, hey, for all the pomp and circumstance that surrounded Barack Obama for 8 years, when it comes to issues about race and reforming police practices, he came up short. And if you look deep down within yourselves, you know that I'm right. So as we're trying to heal from all of the mischief and all of the criminality that these protests are producing, right? Because all we've been seeing is looting and rioting. I'm hoping that law and order can indeed prevail. We'll see what happens in the weeks and months ahead, folks. But you know what? Right now, it's not looking too good because 2020 has indeed been a chaotic year for us. Whether it's been the death of Kobe Bryant, whether it's been this current pandemic of COVID-19, or even these protests that have turned into looting and rioting in many American cities. It's been quite a year for us. And I don't know about you, it's only June, and I'm already exhausted. But what I'm more exhausted about is Barack Obama lecturing us as it pertains to race, police practices, and what things should be like in the United States. You had 8 years to fix it, Barack, and you didn't do it. And quite frankly, I see through you. And you know what? So do millions of Americans. And that's what I'm thinking about right now.
Don't forget to catch Fernando's podcast at blogtalkradio.com/talkonthehudson. New episodes available every Wednesday night at 9 p.m.
In the latest edition of the 3-time award-winning podcast, Talk on the Hudson, which you can listen to live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Talk on the Hudson, was Police Officer Carlos Pina, representing the Union City Police Department. For over 75 minutes, we talked about a variety of different topics, and here are some highlights for your consideration. First and foremost, we talked about his time in law enforcement and how his occupation continues to be under the microscope, especially due to current events. Let's check out what Carlos had to say about it.
But I got to tell you, man, for you and I'm sure for your wife who's also in law enforcement, these last 8 days have had to be maybe a little bit tough for you because of some toxic messages we're seeing on social media.
Absolutely. Actually, the past 2 months, we started with COVID, and we ended up with this unfortunate with George Floyd. It's been really tough. Again, it started with COVID. I saw my coworkers. I've seen EMS officers from every department facing down the devil, basically, with coronavirus, going into houses. It was overwhelming, Fernando. The phone calls that we were getting was nonstop. Again, were they all COVID? No, but a lot of people were nervous. They were calling in whether they had the flu, they didn't know. And as precaution, they would call the police, the ambulance, and we faced the devil. And then we get hit with this. We went from heroes to zeros in 2 seconds. And I immediately denounced it. I went on Facebook and I said, this is disgusting. It's criminal. And I think it's important, as a police officer, to call it what it is. That guy is no brother of mine. I've spoken, we have the thin blue line. We have brother and sisterhood. Those 4 guys are not my brothers in blue. And as you stated earlier, you didn't see it being one of the best departments. We are one of the best. No disrespect to any other. No disrespect to any other department.
Of course.
And I'll explain why. It starts with Brian Stack. He's our mayor. He's the public director for public safety, and he's relentless in the street with his constituents. And then we have Chief Luster, who's in the forefront. And we're big on community policing. That's something that it didn't start today. It didn't start yesterday. It started years ago. And that's why we have such a great rapport with our residents. Another thing that other departments might look at, because they have to reform, Fernando. The police departments have to reform. This cannot happen again. It's happened so many times to Latinos, African Americans, and to whites too. To be fair, it's happened to too many people. And in my experience of 20 years being a police officer in the city, I think that you need to hire within your community. I always say you got to know your hood, you got to know your players, and that's a big problem that we're having throughout the country. I mean, George Floyd, I hear a guy saying, "Oh, let's wait for the autopsy and this and that," a couple of days ago. Well, yes, there has to be an investigation, but it was clear on the video what this man did. It was not the right thing. He killed him. And the other guys, they assisted him, and we have an obligation to talk. If we see something as an officer, we have to stop it, Emotions might get in the way, and you have to pull the officer and say, "Hey, take it easy. I got this," and that's important. We have to police ourselves.
Secondly, we discussed the outstanding leadership brought forth by Union City Mayor Brian Stack and Chief Nichelle Luster in the Union City Police Department, especially during these very difficult times. Let's check out what Carlos had to say about this.
I'm also very proud and happy that Union City residents yesterday were able to march peacefully. Again, it's a First Amendment right to peacefully assemble and at the same time voice concerns. Listen, Chief Luster and the mayor, I think, did a great job in leading the march and being conciliatory and talking to people there, not talking down to them, having, sort of a heartwarming tone to their narrative when they were speaking to the crowd. And it was great. And listen, let's be fair. When you go on social media, there are always some clowns on social media locally that just have, let's be honest, it's stupid signs and just want to make an ass of themselves. That's okay. But the majority of people, as you just said, Carlos, are people that are doing it peacefully, that are doing it with decorum. And that's important. I know that still there's always been concerns about, I know that some business owners locally, as you mentioned, decide to board up their businesses. I know that, for example, Maria Mentiras, a great local restaurant right, near the viaduct on 32nd Street, board up their windows. Hey, better safe than sorry. We've seen a lot of the destruction and looting across the river. And, the horrible position that those police officers are being put in by an incompetent mayor and governor in New York that aren't really showing their support. Yeah, they aren't showing their support for the men and women in blue in New York. And that's really, I'm sure as a cop, Carlos, it has to frustrate you because you see the men and women in blue in New York kind of handcuffed, literally and figuratively, by just utter incompetence, which is what we're seeing with both de Blasio and Governor Andrew Cuomo.
And it goes to show the lack of leadership there, the lack of leadership. And it goes to show you the leadership we have within our county, within our city in Union City. Leadership is important. Lead from the front. It's sad to watch. It's sad to watch these officers. They're basically handcuffed, and they have to do their jobs because people are taking advantage. Now, I understand that, and I even had my own concerns in the beginning. Why didn't they arrest all four officers? At the time they only arrested one. A lot of people had that concern and that complaint, and I justifiably so. And today they did charge him. Why did it take that long? I don't know. I'm not part of that investigation. But I think people are taking advantage now. You have a select few, and they're the ones that are creating the problems. And people want to march peacefully, or they want to protest peacefully, which is their right. But then you have these wise guys that want to take advantage. I mean, what does breaking into Macy's have to do with the death of George Floyd? That has absolutely nothing to do with them. Again,
Carlos,
and again, and destroying your own neighborhood. And people that had stores closed due to COVID, I mean, they're hurting financially. And now you're sending them back. Now, they're probably not going to come back from that. So, unfortunate.
Overall, it was a very informative episode, and you can listen to it in its entirety by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Talk on the Hudson. I can't say enough what an outstanding public servant Carlos Pina is, not just here in Union City, but what a great asset he is to the law enforcement community. And the episode will definitely entertain you, as well as be very informative at the very same time. Some local stories. Let's start off in Bayonne, and a shout out to Corey McDonald with the Hudson County View for his report on this story. Now, let's be very clear, folks. Oftentimes, when it comes to local elections, not always the best candidate wins, and oftentimes residents end up electing someone who's not very well suited for public service. And that's clearly the case here in the city of Bayonne. Now, let me give you some context here about what I'm referring to. Now, according to the Bayonne Board of Education, the body itself has condemned Michael Alonso and has even been calling for his resignation after some divisive posts concerning the death of George Floyd and the protests that have been ensuing since his death. Now, the Bayonne Board of Education passed a resolution condemning as well as distancing the other trustees from Trustee Michael Alonso's comments about George Floyd's protests that are coming up this weekend throughout Hudson County, with some calling for his immediate resignation. Now, again, the hour-long meeting was a very blistering and damning rebuke of Alonso's standing as an elected trustee. Now, the resolution and the comments made by his colleagues during the meeting itself were about as far as elected board officials could go in denouncing Michael Alonso. Now, Board President Maria Valado at one point suggested that the more ethics complaints filed by Bayonne residents against Alonso, the more resonant a message to the other state ethics commissions would be. Quote, and this is according to Board Vice President Christopher Munoz, I will no longer call him a trustee. I think he has lost the privilege to be called a trustee. Now, Alonso, who was elected to the board for a 3-year term in November of 2017, posted on his personal Facebook page this past weekend, asking, quote, where will the Bayonne riot start? At Walmart, at Quick Check, or a ShopRite? In response to the nationwide protests that have sparked by the murder of Minneapolis man George Floyd. Now, the character of a presidential candidate, Joe Biden, showed it looking as changing the Black Lives Matter logo to the Black Vote Matters, with Biden saying that, quote, he fixed it. Now, Michael Alonso has indeed faced a backlash on social media, most notably by accusations that he was purposely trying to incite violence in the community. In addition to that, Bayonne Education Association President Gene Woods went on to say, quote, I pray and pity for what he believes. Somewhere along the line he was misguided and needs to be re-educated. That's what I believe. Now, folks, let me be very clear about this because, we're not perfect, and certainly many of us can have some missteps and some poor judgment on social media. But let me tell you something, because I personally know Michael Alonso, and I know he's been involved in Hudson County politics for quite some time. Many years ago, when serving as the chairman of the Hudson County Young Republicans, I know that Michael Alonso was one that was very heavily involved in trying to get more invested in the organization. And Michael Alonso's been a guy that has attempted to run for public office for quite some time. At some point, you know what? When you run long enough and you try long enough, eventually you'll win a seat. We saw that in Hoboken recently with the election of Phil Cohen to the city council. Again, it was uncontested, But, he's living proof that if you run, eventually, at some point, you may eventually win. And clearly that's the case with Michael Alonso here in Bayonne. Now, I know many of the trustees, and I even know the board president. And to say that they're disappointed would be a profound understatement. But Michael Alonso's always been about this. Michael Alonso's always been about hyperbole and oftentimes just being inflammatory. Now, folks, again, that might sound a little disingenuous coming from me because some may accuse yours truly of engaging in hyperbole or even being bombastic or even trying to be a little divisive. But I'll tell you something, none of those categories fit me. But you know who they fit? They fit Michael Alonso. And I can tell you that personally from knowing him from all these years. So does it surprise me that he made such a comment on his social media? No, it doesn't. Now, hopefully, in the upcoming weekend, we will not see any violent protests throughout Hudson County. We've seen a few of them originate in Union City and in North Bergen, respectively, and they've been peaceful. They've been led by their mayors, respectively, and residents have been able to march up and down streets denouncing the murder of George Floyd at the hands of an overly abusive police officer in the city of Minneapolis. And we're hoping that whether it's in Hoboken or Bayonne or anywhere else in Hudson County in the coming days, that protests, again, do remain peaceful. Now, whether or not Michael Alonso was trying to incite violence or try to incite a riot, I won't go as far as that per se. But the idea that Michael Alonso was being a dumbass on social media, well, if you know Michael Alonso, that's kind of his bread and butter. So, again, I'll keep you posted in the weeks ahead as to what happens with the Bayonne Board of Education. But right now, it seems as if trustees don't have a very high opinion of Michael Alonso, and who can blame them? He's had a long legacy and a long history of acting, let's be honest, like an ass in the Hudson County political arena. So we'll see what happens, moving forward. But right now, it doesn't look very good for Michael Alonso and his position as the trustee with the Bayonne Board of Education.
Don't forget to catch Fernando's podcast at blogtalkradio.com/talkonthehudson. New episodes available every Wednesday night at 9 p.m.
And now let's move to the mile square city of Hoboken. And once again, a shout out to John Highness with the Hudson County Review for his report on this story. Now, it seems as if Hoboken will indeed be abolishing the Office of Constituent Affairs after the City Council was able to override Mayor Robbie Walla's veto. Now, after nearly a month of political posturing in Hoboken that has become sort of the standard procedure, according to many residents, the City Council voted to override the mayor's veto of an ordinance ultimately abolishing the Office of Constituent Affairs. Now, according to some members of the board, quote, I still have concerns over what the sponsors of this ordinance are aiming to achieve, and so I would just call on my colleagues to better articulate, coming out of the discussions we've already had, what this accomplishes. Now, again, this is a quote from Councilwoman at Large, Emily Jabor, and it's something that she said this past week during the online council meetings via Zoom. Now, 4th Ward Councilman Ruben Ramos, who sponsored the ordinance, along with 3rd Ward Councilman Mike Russo, were happy to chime in right away. Now, Ramos responded by saying, quote, I can answer the question. We're talking about a reduction in spending, and that's it. Nothing more and nothing less. Now, Jabor continued, so this accomplishes firing who exactly? Now, this accomplishes in a reduction in spending, and it's up to the mayor to fire or not fire. We went over that at the last council meeting. Now, remember, Councilman Russo asked that question, can the council fire someone? It's a matter of appropriations of what he wants to prioritize. This is, again, according to Councilman Ruben Ramos. Now, Councilman at Large James Doyle also chimed in and said that in order for there to be less spending, there needs to be fewer employees, prompting Council President Jen Giattino to state that lowering salaries was also a possibility. In addition to that, 2nd Ward Councilwoman Tiffany Fisher explained that from her vantage point, the mayor's office was always having to prove that constituent services, no matter what, had to be important. So the department in question does not provide any or new added benefits. No matter what, constituents call City Hall and the staff within City Hall, and they have to provide this. And it's up to the mayor to decide who's best positioned to do that within the budget that he's allowed to have. Now, folks, let me be very clear about this because, as you know, when it comes to economics and fiscal policy at the local, state, and even national level, I tend to be a fiscal conservative. Now, was this department necessary by the mayor? Probably not. It seems to be sort of like the usual fat that exists in city budgets, and oftentimes what balloons municipal budgets up to a point that infuriates taxpayers and residents alike. Now, as it pertains to the city council, as you can see, they don't tend to agree on very much, but it was quite evident that they were in agreement here in making sure that the Office of Constituent Affairs was no more. Now, we'll see what happens in the weeks and months ahead because, as we know, the budget is still being decided upon, and we know that many of the members of the city council are at odds with Mayor Ravi Bala in terms of how spending goes at City Hall, and more importantly, what the budget should entail. Whether it's Councilman Ruben Ramos, Michael Russo, James Doyle, or any of the other council members, they all have something to say about the municipal budget, and I'm sure they're all going to have their ideas about how to reduce spending, especially during these very difficult economic times due to COVID-19. Now, we've seen the possibility of layoffs in recent weeks, and we know that the council members have also voiced their concerns about that. They've also voiced their concerns about what the mayor's going to be doing with the budget moving forward. Listen, it's politics as usual in Hoboken, folks, but I can tell you this much. At least reducing a little less fat on the city budget, I think, is a good thing. So bravo to the city council for doing that, and let's hope that they can be just as judicious when it comes to settling on the budget once and for all.
Don't forget to catch Fernando's podcast at blogtalkradio.com/talkonthehudson. New episodes available every Wednesday night at 9 p.m.
And that's our show for this week. To check out all the excellent programming brought to you by the Hudson Media Group and NJ On Air, please go to their websites, www.hmgtvshows.com, www.livestream.com/hmgtv, and www.njonair.com. Don't forget to like the Hudson Media Group and NJ On Air on Facebook and follow them on Instagram and Twitter. And live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m., you can check out the 3-time award-winning podcast Talking the Hudson by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Talking the Hudson. You can download the episode and listen to it from any PC, Mac, smartphone, or tablet. And never forget, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, it's always talking politics right here with the Hudson Media Group and NJ On Air. I'm Fernando Uribe. Thank you so much for watching.
Don't forget to catch Fernando's podcast at blogtalkradio.com/talkonthehudson. New episodes available every Wednesday night at 9 p.m.